Imagine that a simple parking citation suddenly opens the door to a truth that has been hidden for years. That morning in Providence District Court, coats steamed, papers rustled, and people stared at the floor, waiting for their names. I was 72, halfway down the line, clutching a folder of bills. Old coat, flat shoes, the patience of someone who has spent years in waiting rooms. Then the door opened, and she appeared. Heels hit the tile in a quick, confident beat. A bright coat swung around her knees. Hair perfect, phone glowing in her hand, she moved into line behind me without really looking at anyone. She sighed, checked her screen, shifted her weight. We watched the judge. She watched the clock. The room had the heavy silence of people hoping not to be noticed. She carried herself as if being noticed was the only natural state. "Next case," the bailiff called. The woman in front of me straightened, then flinched when the name wasn't hers. It was the girl's. Before anyone else could move, the girl stepped past me, brushing my arm. Perfume cut through the smell of damp wool. No "excuse me," no nod, just a smooth walk straight toward the bench, as if this had been arranged for her. Murmurs rose at once. The man on my left muttered, "We've been here since 8. A woman with a cane whispered, "Lines don't mean much to some people." My own words slipped out, rough but clear. She didn't even apologize. How do you raise a child like that? The girl turned her head slightly, enough to make sure we heard her. "I don't have time for this," she said, voice steady. "I have a meeting with my father at 3, so let's get this over with." The sound that went through the room was small but deep. The low, tired anger of people who have missed shifts and buses to sit on those benches. No one shouted. They just stared. Behind the bench, Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Miss," he said, "for the record, would you please state your name?" She gave a quick, polished smile. "You should already know," she answered. "I'm not an ordinary person." A few people gasped. Someone whispered, "Listen to that." My fingers tightened on the folder until the cardboard bent. For the first time, I felt something besides irritation. A thin, unwelcome trace of pity. The judge adjusted his glasses. "And why?" he asked quietly. "Are you ahead of everyone else? Every person here is waiting their turn." She let out a small, amused laugh. "Because I don't belong here," she said. The room went still in a different way. On the benches sat people whose names existed only on files and receipts. At the front stood one girl convinced that her own name was a key heavy enough to unlock any door, including this one. Judge Caprio let a few seconds pass, then cleared his throat. "All right," he said. "Let's talk about why you're here. What is the violation?" She rolled her eyes just enough for the first rows to catch it. "It's just parking," she said. My God. I stopped for a minute. Her tone made that minute sound like a personal favor to the court. I shifted my folder against my chest. "It wasn't just anywhere," I murmured, more to myself than to anyone else. "It was in a handicapped zone." The man beside me nodded. "My brother needs that spot," he said under his breath. "Some people think those signs are decoration." On the bench, the clerk read the ticket aloud. She had left her luxury SUV in a space marked with a blue sign and a wheelchair symbol right outside a medical building. No placard, no permit. The girl shrugged. "There was nowhere else to park," she said. "It was packed. I was in and out." Judge Caprio watched her carefully. "You realize," he said slowly, "that particular sign was installed after an incident with a disabled veteran, don't you?" He didn't raise his voice. He let the words carry their own weight. She gave a dry, almost bored laugh. "I grew up around these stories," she replied. "They're all politics. Everything is a photo opportunity. I know how it works." This time, the sound in the courtroom was sharper. It was like the air drew in its breath. A woman near the back whispered, "Did she really just say that?" I had seen her before, though never this close. Rhode Island isn't large, and the governor's family is on every screen. She'd been in glossy campaign mailers as a teenager, with perfect hair and a rehearsed smile. Her parents had posed beside her like a brand, not a family. Her mother vanished from those pictures years ago. The gossip pages said she moved to Florida. The serious papers said nothing at all. "The defendant is the daughter of the governor," I heard a man behind me murmur to his neighbor. "They scrub a lot of her mess out of the news." He wasn't wrong. Stories surfaced now and then. Parties, alcohol, a wrecked car that somehow never made it into public records. Rumors slipped through coffee shops and barber shops, then fell quiet again. Phones rang in the right offices, and the tide went back out. On the bench, the judge remained composed, but his questions grew more precise, as if he were gently testing each piece of her story for cracks. "So," he asked, "with the profile you have, with the influence your family holds, you chose to ignore a space reserved for someone who might not be able to walk from the next block. You understood that, correct?" She tilted her chin, lips tight. "I understand," she said, "that my life has been under a lens since I was a child. Security, cameras, news trucks. I can't even go for coffee without someone filming. If I stop for 1 second, it becomes a headline." Her voice, for just an instant, lost its polish. Then it hardened again. "And anyway," she added, "this is all being blown out of proportion." We all heard what she didn't say out loud. People like us got tickets. People like her got explanations. Judge Caprio leaned back a little, hands folded. "Let's get specific," he said. "Why choose that particular space?" Her answer flew out sharper than before. "Because I got a call from home," she said. "The media were around my car again. I didn't want my plate all over the news. I pulled in, ran inside. That's it." He tilted his head. "And who called you?" She hesitated for the first time. It was only a heartbeat, but you could feel it. "I don't know," she said. "Number wasn't saved." On the bench beside me, a woman snorted softly. I didn't blame her. The girl looked at the floor, then up at the ceiling, anywhere but at the judge. Her jaw moved, as if she were rehearsing what to say next. A few minutes earlier, she had insisted she was late to a meeting with a fashion company. Before that, she'd said she had to see her father by 3. Now, suddenly, the big emergency was a mystery caller. "She can't keep her story straight," I whispered. The clerk read from the citation. Location: Providence, medical complex on Broad Street. A second later, the girl said, without thinking, "I was coming from Kent. The traffic was a nightmare." The man near the aisle shook his head. "Ticket says Providence," he muttered. "She doesn't even remember where she was." The judge glanced at the officer who had written the ticket. "Do we have the body cam footage?" he asked. The officer nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." They rolled in a cart with a monitor. The screen lit up, and suddenly we were all standing in that parking lot with her. There she was, leaning against the SUV, sunglasses on, thumb dancing over her phone. No rushing, no fear, no glance over her shoulder. She was smiling, posing. At one point she lifted her arm, angled the camera, and ducked her head into the frame, lips parted in that social media half-smile I've seen on my granddaughters. The officer's voice came from the speaker. "Ma'am, you can't park here without a permit." Her recorded reply was light, almost playful. "In a minute," she said. "Relax. My father will call your boss." No panic, no mention of reporters, or danger, or strange calls. The real girl, sitting at the table now, kept her eyes on the desk. Color drained from her cheeks, as her own words echoed off the walls. Around me, people shifted, not with satisfaction, but with a weary recognition. We had all heard that tone from someone who thought consequences were optional. When the clip ended, the judge didn't speak at once. The silence had a weight to it. You could hear someone's watch ticking in the second row. Then his voice came, lower, steadier. "I don't think this is about a fine anymore," he said. "You're afraid of something, and it isn't this courtroom." Her gaze flicked up, then away. For the first time, the confidence slipped, and underneath it, I saw what I hadn't expected at all: a very young, very tired face. The judge reached for a thinner folder that had been resting off to the side. He opened it with the care of someone who already knew what was inside. "We aren't done with the record," he said. "This ticket is one of several, 5 to be exact." A low sound moved through the seats, like a chair scraping the floor. She stared at him. "That's impossible," she burst out. "Those aren't mine. Someone's trying to make me look bad." He didn't argue. He simply lifted a page. "Same vehicle," he said. "Same registration. Same driver on the videos." On the monitor, image after image appeared. The same SUV, the same plate, driveways, red curbs, hydrants. Her voice on different days, saying she would only be a second, insisting that people would take care of it. Her shoulders, so straight earlier, began to fold inward. I could almost see the calculation on her face. The tally of times doors had quietly opened for her, and how different this room suddenly felt. It seemed to dawn on her that there were too many eyes here, too much paper, for her father's office to sweep this away. The side door clicked open. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, tie slightly askew, jaw tight. I recognized him from the local news, one of the governor's lawyers. He came up behind her, leaned close, and spoke in a low whisper that still carried to the first row. "Your father says you keep your mouth shut," he hissed. "No details about home, none. Understand?" Her fingers twisted together on the table. Whatever defiance had been in her posture vanished. She didn't look entitled now. She looked trapped. The judge watched the exchange without interrupting. When the lawyer stepped back, trying to melt into the wall, the judge turned his attention to the young woman again. "Let me ask you something," he said quietly. "What frightens you more, the decision here, or what waits for you when you walk out of this courthouse?" Her gaze flickered, just enough to answer before her lips moved. She swallowed. When she finally spoke, the words came out in pieces, as if each one hurt. I don't get to make mistakes," she said. "Not ever, not once." No one moved. It wasn't the bravado we'd heard earlier. It was something stripped down. The sound of a person who had been walking a narrow line so long, she no longer remembered what it meant to step freely. In that moment, her last thin layer of practiced confidence gave way, and behind it, the room saw not a symbol of a famous name, but the frightened child who had been carrying it. The judge let her last words hang there, then opened the thicker stack of papers the clerk had brought. "Miss," he said, voice even, "how many times do you think you've ignored the rules because you believed there would be no consequences?" She stared at the folder as if it were something alive. I don't keep track," she muttered. "I did," he replied. He lifted the top sheet. 11 citations in 2 years. Speeding, red lights, restricted zones. This handicapped space is only the latest. A dull rumble went through the benches. No outrage now, just the tired sound of people realizing this hadn't been a single slip. He didn't gloat. He simply continued, almost like a teacher walking through a lesson. "Some of these never reached a hearing. They were voided. Notes from administration appear in the margins." I leaned forward. Even from where I sat, I could see the scribbled initials, the short lines of ink where someone had made a problem disappear. Her breath came quicker. She pressed her palms flat against the table, as if she needed to hold herself in place. "I only drove like that when I was getting away from home," she burst out suddenly. "You don't understand. Staying there, you can't breathe. The walls listen. Every word is recorded, judged." Her voice cracked on that last word. The judge's expression softened, but his questions did not. "Did your father threaten you?" he asked gently. "Did he make you afraid to speak about what happens in that house?" She said nothing. Her lips stayed clamped, but tears slipped down anyway, quick and angry. It was answer enough. Beside the aisle, an older police officer shifted in his seat. He had the look of someone who'd seen a lot and told little. Suddenly he stood. "Your Honor," he said, clearing his throat, "I should have said this earlier." The judge nodded once. "Go ahead, Sergeant." The officer's hands were tight at his sides. "We received calls," he said, "from the governor's office, more than once. We were instructed to cancel her tickets, to handle it quietly." He paused, swallowed. "We did, because we were afraid of losing our jobs." A sharp intake of breath swept the room. The lawyer in the corner shifted color. The officer kept going, words gathering strength as they came. "It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. I'm saying it now because it has to stop somewhere." For a moment, the courtroom felt different. Less like a hallway of forms and fines, more like a place where something important might actually change. Around me, faces that had been hard with disapproval softened. People still disapproved of what she'd done. That didn't vanish. But as they looked at her, at the officer, at the judge, there was something new in their eyes. It felt, just for once, as if truth had forced its way past every closed door and careful phone call, and finally stood where everyone could see it. She sat still after the officer finished, as if any movement might crack what was left of her composure. The lawyer at the wall pinched the bridge of his nose. No one else spoke. The judge looked at her directly, as if there were no cameras or titles beyond these walls. "Miss," he said, "you've heard a great deal said about you. What haven't you been allowed to say?" For a moment, nothing came. Her throat worked, but no sound. When words finally broke loose, they were barely louder than a whisper. "Do you know what it's like," she began, "to grow up where one wrong sentence can ruin a campaign? Where your birthday, your grades, who you sit with at lunch, all of it is part of a brand?" Her hands trembled on the tabletop. "If I win something, it's not mine. It proves the family image is intact. If I fail..." She let out a thin breath. "Failure doesn't exist. It gets erased or punished until it looks like success." "Love comes with conditions," she said. "Behave, smile, stand straight, don't date the wrong person, don't get caught, don't embarrass the name. You stop being a person, you're packaging." The edge had gone from her tone. The judge removed his glasses and set them down. "I don't see a scandal," he said. "I see someone who has never been allowed the ordinary mercy of a mistake. You're not a logo. You're not a shield for anyone's ambition." He rested a palm on the stack of tickets. "These papers show patterns that can't go on. There must be consequences. But my work is not to grind down people who are already cornered. It's to point them toward a better path." She drew in a shaky breath. "I don't want them to bury this," she said. "Not this time. I'm willing to testify, under oath, about the calls, the pressure, all of it. I'm done being the excuse for what my father does." A murmur swept the gallery. The governor's lawyer went pale. "Cooperating with an investigation is a serious choice," the judge said. "If you keep your word, you'll face hard days. But they'll be yours." Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't hide them. "I'd rather answer for my own actions," she said, "than spend one more year covering his." I held my folder, my ticket suddenly very small. Around me, heads that had shaken in disapproval earlier now dipped in something closer to respect. In that old courthouse, a plain truth settled. A famous name can crush a life, yet it can also be the burden a person finally sets down to stand upright at last.